Hello and welcome back to Season 2 of Another Man's Shoes. We're delighted to have everyone with us. It's been a couple of months off, but we've been busy here recording all of the next season, and we've got another 10 episodes to get aired every week. What we're asking is if you're listening to the show, not too sure what medium you use, because we're on Spotify, podcasts, on Apple, and various other mediums, but if you have got access to Apple iTunes, that's the only one that lets you sort of like and sort of leave a review. So it'd be great if you could just pop on there, or ask your friends to pop on there. Just leave us a little star rating, leave one-word comments even. It just helps us get up the rankings and people find us and get to listen to the show, which we hope they enjoy as much as you guys are. So this season we are on the Explorers and Adventurers. We sort of did season 1, which was military, and season 2 is Explorers and Adventurers. And I've got to say, some of these interviews that we've done are real edge of your seat stuff. On this first interview, we've got Holly Budge. Now, we've actually brought Holly on today. It's quite a special day. It's 23rd of June. And that's sort of World Female Ranger Day. And you'll understand more why that's sort of prevalent in a minute when you listen to Holly in the show. But yeah, you're going to love this next hour. So all I would say is, sit back, grab yourself a brew, and enjoy the show. Holly, thanks for coming on tonight. Great to speak to you.
Thank you, Adam. It's great to be here chatting with you today.
It is, and I think we're going to sit back for an hour in your shoes, and I think we'll probably all be quite tired by the end of it from what I've read about what you've done. So before we jump into the show and we talk about all the great adventures, it's good to get a bit of background and a bit about you and the journey that you sort of travelled sort of in your younger formative years. So can you sort of just tell us a bit about what life was like growing up, and really sort of how your childhood was, and were you always into what you're into, or is this like a path that you just sort of pivoted down?
Well, I think I've always been very adventurous. I was probably quite a disruptive child. I think it was quite impressive to be expelled from school at age 4 for being, trying to be into everything, disrupting people. But yeah, I've always loved the outdoors, and I feel very fortunate to have had the childhood that the era that I grew up in, without technology as we know it today. So spent tremendous amounts of time outdoors. I learnt to ride ponies and then horses from before I could walk, and was competing at a pretty young age. And by the time I was about 6 or 7, I was, or probably 7, I was competing in triathlon events. So running, swimming, shooting, and shooting targets, and horse riding. And I was really competitive. And we would, as a team, we did really well. We won most of the events that we did. And I think it really instilled to me at a very young age. It kind of toughened me up. When you fall off the horse, you get straight back on and you try again. And it also taught me very much the importance of teamwork. And I realised, I was pretty good at the riding and the swimming, and I was terrible at running, and I was okay at shooting. So the other members of our team had strengths that I didn't have. So I think these were all really valuable lessons to learn, especially going on to make a career and a life in the world of adventure and conservation. So went on to compete for my country, represented Great Britain on a couple of times. But what I realised is it was just a massive commitment, especially when I was at 17, 18 years old. I just sort of gone to college and discovered all sorts of new and exciting things, and suddenly riding horses all the time and every weekend and every evening just didn't seem as exciting as it once had. But for me, the adventure took a whole new turn when I was 21. I went travelling around Australia and New Zealand, like many people do. And I threw myself out of a perfectly good aeroplane doing a tandem skydive. And that 60 seconds of adrenaline and that 60 seconds of sheer terror completely changed the course of my life forever. Yeah. So I decided there and then that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to move to New Zealand and get a job throwing myself out of perfectly good aeroplanes every day of the year.
Yep.
My careers advisor at school hadn't mentioned this to me, so this was a whole new thought. And that's what I did. I came back to the UK, carried on working in my role as a graphic designer, saved up enough money to escape the concrete jungle, and bought a plane ticket back to New Zealand, put myself through my skydiving course, and several months later I achieved my rather far-fetched goal, and it was a dream job. I was getting paid to jump out of aeroplanes up to 12 times a day, every day. Only 3 jumps were needed to pay my whole month's rent. Brilliant. So I've never actually had so much disposable income as I did when I was 21. But what it did do was it gave me this massive confidence and this belief that I could do whatever I put my mind to, or I could at least have a go. So I've tried to keep that 21-year-old mindset, as I like to call it, going. I'm now 42. So over the last 2 decades, I've really tried to hang on to that mindset, not overthinking, not procrastinating too much, and just going for it. So that's actually taken me on some pretty incredible adventures around the world.
It has. I mean, what an amazing... So you took your sort of gap year, we did your travel year, where most people go on that, and then when they come home and think, oh, what am I going to do? They get all depressed, and what am I going to do in life? And they've had a great adventure, but they haven't actually done much and worked out what they're going. And you've come back off this amazing adventure, and actually that's it. You sort of mapped out where you want to go. So, you've gone and achieved that. So, yeah, I mean, actually, I've done some skydiving in New Zealand. What an amazing place. I was up in Bay of Islands, I think it was called. But they're jumping really high over there, because typically you struggle to get up to 15 here, but I think it was about 20,000 they did over there.
Yeah, maybe, yeah. I mean, most of the time we were jumping out around sort of 12 to 15,000 feet, but I think...
So how many jumps have you got in?
Probably done about 3,500 jumps now.
Yeah, you bored of it yet after 3,500?
Do you know, I haven't skydived for 11 years now, so... Okay. And I don't really miss it. I'm much more into mountaineering these days, but I think I did so much in a short space of time. I just kind of, I don't feel a need to, if I went back to it now, I'd kind of want to go and base myself somewhere for a month or two and just bang out a whole load of jumps rather than just one here or one there,
Yeah, not quite the same.
No.
That's brilliant. So after you sort of got into the skydiving scene, I mean, that is quite a scene. It's quite clicky, and you meet lots of interesting people. Did you do like any of these sort of mass jumps you sort of see? I know in America they were trying to get 100 odd people out on one stick or whatever. They were cramming them all in. A bit Paris Island, I think it was. There's been some pretty cool.
I haven't. No, they're called big waves, but I haven't done any. I've done probably, I don't know, the most I've done might be 30 people on a jump, so reasonably a fair amount of people in the sky all together at once. We used to go to this pretty crazy skydiving festival in Australia, which is still going, called the Funny Farm. And just, I mean, it might be a little bit different now, but certainly sort of 18 years ago it was pretty wild. And they had a big sky van where the whole back opened up. And then, people were jumping out with sofas, and I think a car went out. They were rolling bowling balls off the back of the sky van and had targets on the ground. And we did a pretty big way jump out of there, but like a tracking jump. And it was probably one of my most memorable jumps in terms of how beautiful the night sky was. So it was like sunset and just all your mates. And it was just an incredible time. And also, Adam, it was amazing hanging around with such positive people. Like anything seemed possible. Yeah. And indeed it was. If you could believe that you could do it, you could do it. And I think that really rubbed off on me, that kind of attitude, that real have a go, just throw yourself into it.
Absolutely. And if anyone that's listening to this who wants to sort of get into skydiving and is maybe a bit worried about it, would you give anyone a tip, about like when they're getting into the door, or what the best way of overcoming that fear is?
Well, first tip is skydiving in the UK is is a time-consuming exercise because you literally are waiting on the weather for the most part. So if you really do want to learn to skydive and you are in the UK, your best bet is to go to Spain for a week. Really cool drop zones over there. It's hot. The plane's running all day long. So then you can really just, bang out a load of jumps in a short period of time. So that would be my advice. But for me, managing fear, it's an incredible thing. When you first do a bungee jump or you first do a skydive, it's pretty terrifying. Plummeting to earth at 120 miles per hour plus just is a complete sensory overload, especially the first few times. And I used to sit in the plane on the first few jumps, looking at the more experienced jumpers, the staff, the cameramen, the tandem masters, and they used to be sitting there laughing and joking and having a fun time in the plane on the way up. And I used to think, God, how can you get to that level of, that sort of much comfort, knowing that you're just about to throw yourself out of a perfectly good aeroplane? And very quickly after I got my job, that was me. That was me laughing, joking. And it's amazing how quickly you can normalize something that was once incredibly terrifying. I used to say to people, jumping out of a plane was like getting up and cleaning my teeth.
It is, and it's actually quite a safe sport when you look at statistics.
Statistically, it is, but it's still, if I went and did a jump now, even with 3,500 jumps under my belt, it would be really terrifying because I haven't jumped for so long. So it is, it's still a pretty, balls out thing to be doing, chucking yourself out of a plane. It's not a normal thing to do.
No, everyone should try it. If you want to live a little, go for a jump.
But what I did find when I was jumping sort of 12 times a day is, you started to get a bit comfortable sometimes and a bit blasé, and that was when it sort of could have turned around and bite you on the bum. So, you might have forgotten to check some of your equipment, or, just taking it a little bit for granted that, you think you'll be all right. And I think that's the dangerous area.
Yeah, we had a guy, we were jumping a few years back, and when we were doing our military jumps, and obviously as you're packing your chute and you're going through your various checks, and a few of those guys just got more into the habit of sort of cram it and ram it, sort of,
Yeah.
And they were like, well, look, it wants to open. So if it doesn't open, I got my reserve. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? I'm just going to spend a little bit longer packing this bad boy.
Well, unfortunately, Adam, we obviously did pack our parachutes sometimes if we were doing fun jumps. But when I was working, just had two rigs rotating all day long, and you had a packer. Yeah. And my packer was called Super Dave, and Super Dave was all about ramming it in there. He just didn't care. So
it wants to open.
That was probably the scariest part of my job, was relying on Super Dave's pack jobs.
Of your 3,500.
I only pulled my reserve once in all that time. Had a few other mishaps, but only had to pull my reserve once in that time.
Well, that's testament then, isn't it, to the safety of it all? So when you were in New Zealand, you sort of spent a lot of time out there having a great time. Then you sort of got more into the camera side of things, did you? And sort of the recording?
The camera straight away, to be honest. Yeah. So when I did my first tandem and then realised that's what I wanted to do, become a camera woman, I didn't actually know anything about skydiving or filming. So again, the filming was quite far-fetched. But to be honest, when you're a skydiving camera person, this was pre-GoPro days. So we had a digital SLR on the top and a video camera strapped on the side. So my camera helmet was about 3.5 kilos, which is quite a lot on your neck. And then we used to take the photos with a button that sat in your mouth. So you just take the photos with your pushing it with your tongue. And then you just hit record on the video. And when you start, you have a sight on your goggles. So you've got a rough idea of what you're filming. But, as you get more experienced, you kind of hope that you know what you're filming and where your camera is pointing, etc. But it was funny because it was in the days of film. So we used to give people a film roll when they got down. And, of course, sometimes, we had mechanical malfunctions and didn't get all the photos. So it was a real game changer when, digital came in. Sorry, so we started off with a film SLR and then went to a digital SLR. And nowadays, of course, it's all weenie cameras and the camera helmet probably doesn't even weigh half a kilo. So things have changed massively in the last 20 years since I was doing it. But
game changing on that front. I think 20 years ago you couldn't even get a camera on your phone, or if it was just little pixels. It was it's amazing how quickly it's all gone along. But I suppose on the camera side of things, I mean, was that like a job that was in demand? Is there quite a lot of call for that on the movie sets or to follow adventures around the world?
To be honest with you, I didn't ever look at it. I would have preferred. I always wanted to be a stunt woman. That was my ultimate sort of goal. Once I got into skydiving, but yeah, I mean, a massive demand for it with people doing tandem skydives. So you could go all around the world working as a camera woman or a cameraman, working at different drop zones for sure, because people always want their jumps filmed. But I'd imagine, I think working on movie sets and being a cameraman on Point Break and things like that. Yeah. I imagine that's probably more specialist stuff or just who you know. But we did do some fun jumps. We had a TV crew come and they wanted a load of naked skydivers. So we asked backpackers who wants a free skydive. You've got to get your kit off. So we had, the queue as long as you can imagine. So that was pretty funny watching everyone in free fall with their wobbly bits. We did definitely did some fun jumps in and amongst, your regular filming the tandems.
So when you finished the sort of the parrot, you sort of said you gave that up and you then sort of moved more across onto the mountaineering. I basically heard about the opportunity when I was working in New Zealand to jump out of a plane next to Mount Everest. Yeah. So as a skydiver, I just knew that was an opportunity I didn't want to miss out on. So it was a world first expedition, and I rang the organizer and said, I really want to join the team. And it quickly became apparent there were no other women signed up. So I knew that was my hook for getting sponsors on board. And he said, great, can I count you in? And I said, yeah, count me in. And he said, that will be £24,000. Yeah. I said, yeah, 100%, count me in. Didn't have £24,000. But just knew that by setting myself another big goal, I had, I'd go give it my all to go and find those sponsors and get them to buy into me and my vision. And that's exactly what I did. So the aircraft that we jumped out of at 29,500 feet had never flown to that altitude before. So we didn't even know if we were going to make it up there. But we did. But what happened next, Adam, nothing could have prepared me for. The door opened, 29,500 feet. The first person to skydive Everest was about 3 seconds in front of me. Yeah. And they jumped out. My camera flyer climbed out onto the step. And I'm giving my count, ready, set. And the next thing, my camera flyer's hand is on my shoulder, pushing me back into the plane, saying, you can't jump, don't get out. And unbeknown to me, the pilot had held up the stop sign behind me saying, don't let the jumpers out. But it was too late. I had too much momentum on my ready, set, go. I'm backpedaling in the door. And I fell out of the plane. So people say, was skydiving Everest, your best skydive ever? No, it was pretty terrifying. Yeah. Had like the equivalent of student equipment on because my parachute was 3 times the size of my normal chute because of the higher altitude, thinner air. So it was pretty bulky equipment, and there was almost complete cloud cover on the ground. So when you're kind of up at those altitudes, the minute you even see the clouds rolling up the valley, the next minute you can be totally engulfed in them really quickly. So when you're skydiving, you don't really have any fancy equipment. It's just your eyes. So it didn't have any visuals on the ground below. And I had to make it back to this landing area, disused airstrip.
which was perfectly big enough, assuming you made it back there. There was just very few other places that you could have made a safe landing. So I came through the clouds, pulled my parachute, that opened, always a good thing. Came through the clouds, and I had to take my oxygen mask off because it was really obscuring my vision, and I was just hell-bent on finding this landing area. So I was still at 18,000 feet without oxygen, so it's, still pretty high. And then I made it back. I had a good landing, and then about 2 minutes later it was complete whiteout. You couldn't see even a couple of meters in front of you. So I felt really fortunate to walk away safely from that jump. Couple of days later, same thing happened. Pilot held up the stop sign, group of skydivers got out, and unfortunately for them, the clouds went all the way to the ground.
Right.
So, one girl broke her back and her femur. Another guy landed in a yak farm. It was all like it went.
Crazy.
It kind of fell apart a little bit on that day. But by the time I had got back to the UK, which was 2 days after I did the jump, that was probably the scariest thing of it all, was the media. The global media picked up the story, and I was put in a hotel for 24 hours, courtesy of the BBC. Did 6 live TV interviews, went on the red sofa, the BBC Breakfast red sofa, CNN, CBS. And I mean, I'm much more prepared these days and have done a lot more with the media. But back then it was just thrusted into the limelight, and then a few days later, your old news.
Yes.
But it was quite an experience, and the expedition raised $300,000 for a charity called Global Angels. So a massively successful expedition.
Brilliant. Interesting. I did quite a lot of work with military sort of veterans charities.
Oh yeah.
And in the diary for this November is Skydive Everest. And so,
oh really?
Yeah. So when you sort of just said that, I was thinking, I'm going to sort of rinse you for all the information on this. Like, it's still expensive. It's still about £20,000 for a tandem jump. It's big money. I guess you've got a specialist equipment and getting people up there, and if you get injured, it's probably a bit of a pain getting down.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's brilliant that it's become an annual event because it's such a great way to raise money for charity as well, and just get a superb view of the Himalayas.
Yeah, a lot of people have climbed Everest now, but not many have jumped it. So
no, that's true.
Maybe that's the new thing, and it's a lot easier. You haven't got to train as much.
So in answer to your question of how did I get into mountaineering, when I first laid eyes on Mount Everest, which was pretty magical, I just knew one day I would be back to try and climb to the top. But I just knew nothing about mountaineering. So I set about learning how to climb, and quickly found myself back in the Himalayas. I went to climb Mira Peak, which is a 6,500 meter peak. It's known as a trekking peak, but I'd say that's a little bit deceptive in that it's still a really big, high altitude mountain. The following week, I went on and climbed Burunsi, which is one of the most, if not the most remotest mountain in Nepal. And they call it Death Valley because you have to go in, you hike in over a 6,000 meter pass, and you hike out over a pass, and if the weather comes in, they can't get helicopters in and out for rescue. And that was my first taste of big mountain climbing, and it was it's pretty freaky. Like, Burunsi is very exposed, and there's little ledges that are sort of less than a foot wide, and they just have massive drop-offs on each side, sort of 1,000 meters, like almost straight down to the base camp. And you're shuffling across these little ledges. I've got this video clip I took on my GoPro, and when I give talks, you always get a when you put that. It's that kind of, oh my God, if you had any issues with height, you would not like these ledges at all. But fortunately for me, my skydiving background set me up well for these exposed mountaineering moments. But yeah, Burunsi, and then I went on and did my first 8,000 meter peak, Choyoyu, from Tibet, and that was, I'll tell you, on the first two mountains in the Himalayas, I felt, I was pretty good. And I don't mean that arrogantly. I just mean I dealt with the altitude really well. And I got to the summit 2 hours before anyone else that was in the team. As in, there were Sherpas there.
Yes.
And I was actually the last to leave the high camp. And I didn't even realise that I'd overtaken everyone, because it's dark and you're just focused on, 1 foot in front of the other.
Yeah.
And when I got to the summit, I just assumed they'd all summited and come back down again. And the Sherpa was like, oh, no, we're the first up here for today. And not many people summited that mountain that whole season because of the weather. And at the time, I didn't realise, and people were saying to me, especially like the big guys, real six-packed guys, like, well, hang on, how are you getting to the summit quicker than me? What are you doing differently? And at the time, I didn't know. But now I do know, and it's a technique that I use on every mountain I climb, and I've called it the mirror step. And it's a really simple technique, but really effective, and you can use it running and walking as well. And basically, when you leave a high camp, it's pitch dark, there's nothing to see, it's freezing cold, and I just slotted in behind the Sherpa that I was climbing with. And when he moved his left foot, I moved mine. When he moved his right foot, I moved mine. And I just got sort of really fixated on following his feet. And the good thing with the Sherpas is they don't stop. So they don't stop-start. A lot of people, go fast,
break
and then
rhythm.
stop. Fast, stop. And these guys, they just plod on very slowly and methodically. So it was quite a meditative exercise following their feet. But what it did, and this is the key, is it kept my mind quiet. So I get pretty anxious. I don't mean to, but at high altitude, I sort of get quite anxious. And, if I'm sleeping at high altitude, I can scratch myself so hard I can make myself bleed. It's kind of a subconscious anxiety. But when I'm climbing, I always now try and keep a really quiet mind. And by following in the footsteps, it kind of keeps those negative voices at bay, because when you get left behind, or you get behind the group and you can't catch up, and you're at high altitude and it's freezing cold and it's pitch dark, and then you start thinking, well, am I not good enough? Why have I got behind the group? Am I going to be left alone here? Am I going to die here? And these are all pretty scary thoughts in the moment. So by doing this following behind, you're always with someone, and it keeps your mind quiet. And now I'm a little less selfish about it. I now rotate. So my climbing partner will follow my feet, and then I'll rotate round and follow theirs. So it's a little bit like the road biking, the drafting, but for the mind. It's like mental drafting.
I remember that.
Every mountain I do now, that's a technique. But going back to the 8,000 metre peak, Choi Oyu, only 5 of us summited for that whole season because the weather was pretty tough as well. And so I was employing this technique on that mountain. But that last 1,000 metres, when you get up into the zone and above 8,000 metres, what I've found is, it's tough, even breathing and walking. And even if you're that Sherpa that's climbing Everest for the 24th time, everyone in the death zone is fighting hard. There's a brilliant expression: train hard, fight easy. My husband likes to tell me that, but what I've come to realise is on these big mountains, you've got to train hard, you've got to fight hard as well. At these altitudes, it's not a walk in the park.
You've got to attack it. There's no other options. That you got to go in 100%. But so
absolutely.
Did you go for the season then? You went over to sort of Nepal and just spent the season out there climbing big peaks, or was this over a sort of a series?
No, so
of
I
years?
did Mira and Barunsi as a one trip. So that was a 5-week trip, and then 6 months later I went back and climbed Choi Oyu, and that was a 6-week trip, 6 or 7 weeks. And I took time out from work, and they were all self-funded. I couldn't get sponsored for them, unfortunately. I was still just learning. But for Everest, I did get sponsored by an IT company promoting Wi-Fi in remote places.
Yeah.
You have to be quite creative to get sponsored these days on Everest. Obviously, it's, quite a few people have climbed it, as you said earlier. But I decided to climb Everest on the north side from Tibet. And the reason I decided to do that was to avoid the queues. Yeah. So on the south side, they might issue 500 climbing permits, but on the north side, they may issue 150 or less. So with the north, it's barren, it's cold, and also there's no helicopter view. So the Chinese won't allow any helicopters in that airspace. So my husband is a helicopter pilot, so he had at times, which we'll get onto in a minute, when I got back in a storm at 8,300 meters on Everest, he had this kind of romantic vision of getting a helicopter from Nepal and flying it around the side, picking me up. But yeah, the reality is you've got to pretty much walk or be dragged.
Self-extract.
Off that mountain. Yeah. But yeah, I was on the mountain 47 days above 5,000 meters. So it's a long expedition. The whole expedition was 60 days. And it's tough. It's hard. Life above 5,000 meters is, it takes it out of you. Like the sort of, if you're on a sliding scale of strength, it's definitely declining. Yeah. You do 3 rounds of acclimatization. So you spend a week at base camp trying to acclimatize. Then you go up to advanced base camp, 6,000 meters. Felt pretty rough when I first arrived there. You spend a few days there. You then touch the North Pole at 7,000 meters without supplemental oxygen, but you don't spend a night there. Then you come all the way back to base camp. These are big distances, hours, and pretty challenging terrain. And you spend a week at base camp, and then you go back up to advanced base camp, spend a night at North Pole, 7,000 meters, come all the way back to base camp. And by that time, you're thinking, the summit's, I'm close to the summit. I just want to carry on. But the reality is you're not close to the summit at all there. There's still a long way to go. So you go all the way back to base camp, hang out there for another few days, and then you go for your summit push. So back up to advanced base camp, night at North Pole, night at Camp 2, touch Camp 3, go for the summit, and then the plan is to get back to advanced base camp after the summit. That's how it should pan out, but for me, it didn't pan out like that. I was climbing as a 2-man team, which is rare. Most people climb in big commercial teams. And pros and cons of climbing as a 2-man team: you're flexible, you're agile, you can make decisions quickly, you can move at the pace that suits the two of you rather than the whole team. But on the downside, obviously, it's a risky business. If anything happens to your climbing buddy, you are, on your own. So me and my climbing partner, we sat on the summit of Everest for half an hour. North side with no one else up there, which is almost unheard of. An incredible experience, a blue sky, a beautiful view. But we got there pretty late. We got there at 1:30 in the day, and that's pretty late. You kind of want to get there much earlier in the morning. But the reason we got there late was we spent another 7 hours waiting in the Camp 3 in high camp because we wanted the 2 teams ahead of us to go on ahead, because we didn't want to get caught in a queue. And we still had to queue for like 2 hours, wait while they came down as we were going up. There was a little bit of a bottleneck. So even though we were fortunate and to have the summit to ourselves and we planned to hit it at that time, the clouds rolled in thick and fast after that half an hour, and we actually got caught at 8,300 meters for the night at Camp 3. And that was a pretty scary night. The wind just picked up and up and up. It got really strong, and I thought the tent was just going to be blown clean off the mountain. And because of my skydiving experience, I kind of was lying in the tent envisaging being in free fall, but in a yellow tent or a yellow coffin at that point. And So yeah, it was a pretty terrifying night, and it was really tough for my family and people following me because my tracker, not literally, but on the screen, had fallen off the mountain for 16 hours. So the little dot that they were following on the map was at the bottom of the mountain. So it did look like I'd just fallen clean off the side of the mountain. So that was a fortunate technical hitch at the wrong time. But yeah, so spent a night there, and then we knew we had to get off that mountain fast. This storm was not relenting. People that were at campsites lower than me, Camp 2, one guy lost his whole tent. He was on the ground sheet, and the tent had ripped off and blown off around him, and all his belongings had been blown away. So yeah, absolutely, just a sense of how strong that the wind was. And also, Adam, that was, when I encountered the first dead body that I came across on Everest. There's dead bodies on Everest, but until I actually had to step over one, I wasn't really prepared for that. That was had quite a profound effect on me, I have to say. It's an Australian guy that had died the day before. And I saw him as I was going up. So he was just outside Camp 3.
So this isn't a body that's been there for years. This is someone you've actually seen.
He died the day before. Wow. So he was brand new gear. Like some of the bodies on Everest, you can see they've been there for quite a while because they're very wind battered and faded and torn clothing. But this guy was, just brand new down suit, brand new boots. Yeah. It was really sad. And I was just listening to my music, getting a rhythm, going up this steep slope. And I just saw this dark mass in the snow. And I kind of double took. And then just like brain cells start working, and you just start thinking, is he dead? He's died. And then I stood there probably for 3 or 4 minutes just looking at him. Yeah. And you can't see, he's just the down suit. But it was freaky. And then you had to climb over the rope that he's attached to. So where else in the world do you step over the dead?
I know. And you can't extract off the mountain, I guess. It's so high, it's too dangerous to try and get the bodies down.
Yeah, I mean, they do extract them, but it is very dangerous, and it can cost around $250,000 US for a body retrieval from that sort of altitude. But some people, especially people in their religions and cultures that need the body to, lay them to rest, they pay that kind of money. And then there's a sort of moral dilemma as to, do you send a team of 10 or 12 Sherpas up to retrieve a dead body? It's it's a difficult one.
Balance it.
So he was the first one I saw, and then going up to the summit, probably saw about 9 more bodies. Wow. And it is a part of climbing Everest. I've never seen another body on another mountain before, but the thing that alarmed me more than the dead bodies was the near dead. So I got quoted the other month for calling Everest a zombie apocalypse movie, because then you see bodies that you think have died, you think they're dead, and then they move. Hang on a minute, he's just moved his arm or his leg, and that's pretty freaky. And then you look round and there's a couple of Sherpas taking a break, have a cigarette or whatever, just chilling out, because the guy is semi-conscious, and they literally have a meter rope, Sherpa behind, Sherpa in front, and him in the middle with a rope to the Sherpas. And so I spoke to the Sherpas afterwards, and they literally hide behind people on the summit so they can have their summit photo.
Right. God,
you're just barely conscious, but
because people are so exhausted. I mean, it's an extreme event. It's like climbing that high.
Just a lot of it's just box ticket. People just want to tick the box of climbing Everest. I mean, I was pretty horrified meeting some people that I met on Everest. Some of them had never stepped foot on snow before, let alone put on a pair of crampons, let alone climbed another mountain before. And of those 260 bodies on Everest, half of them are Sherpas. And that's not because they haven't got the ability to be there. It's literally they're dragging people up and back. And if they get caught, they pay the ultimate price for that. So
that's unacceptable.
I don't have
really.
a desire to go back there.
No, I mean, it's a great box to tick, though. That achievement is really commendable. A few years ago.
I'm proud. I'm proud that I climbed it responsibly. I'm proud to have had a responsible and good summit and made good decisions. That's
good. Again, that's probably your experience leading up to that. You put yourself 100%. In situations, and you've just got that. You got something you can draw on. You've got an experience in the past, and you can just relate to that and reflect on it and think, well, I know how I'm going to deal with this.
Well, I often get asked, by people what to do to climb Everest, and it's like, at the very minimum, go and learn how to mountaineer. Get some skills behind you. Make Everest a 5-year goal. Go and climb some other lesser peaks. Everest isn't a technical mountain. It's just extremely high altitude. And it's an endurance. It's a long slog at high altitude. And a lot of people can't deal with the altitude. So rather than pay phenomenal amounts of money, go to a lesser mountain and see how you fare at altitude.
Totally
some people
agree.
Just can't deal with altitude.
They can't. A couple of years ago, a friend and I, we sort of decided almost overnight, let's go and climb Mont Blanc. So we sort of zipped over, climbed it, and man, the worst headache ever. I mean, I can't remember how high that is, like 4.8 or something. And that wasn't a pleasant experience, but it's probably, we just didn't acclimatise, even though we're both experienced, we just sort of up and down, thinking we knew better, and then bad headache, and then you think about all the ramifications of that. But then I got to the bottom a couple of days later, you kind of forget about, how silly you might have been. And I thought, right,
so we started, hangover, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. We thought, let's climb Everest. How hard is this going to be? So we phoned a company, and they said, not a problem. God knows how. I think it was like 60,000, 70,000 pounds. It was an extreme amount of money. I was like, okay. And I said, what experience? He went, no, don't worry about that. As long as you've got the right kit, we're here. We'll get you up. And it just didn't sit well with me. So we phoned another company, and they just wouldn't touch us. They said, no. You need to have bagged at least 2 or 3 7,000s. We want you to have gone and done like Aconagra or some of the 7 summits, maybe some of the that are more achievable. Go and do whatever there was. There's one over Russia Way. They said that's quite a cheap one to go and do. Elbrus, that's it. And so I thought, okay, I like this company. It's responsible, but obviously then the world changes. You have families. COVID comes along, and I think we'll just put that one in the box for the.
Put that on ice.
Yeah, I've just spoken to you. I think that's enough for me now, actually, for Everest.
Yeah, but the sad thing also, Adam, is that the Sherpas, the Sherpas I was climbing with, were the mountain at the time. Some of them are getting paid as little as $5 a day, and they're lugging oxygen up, they're lugging equipment up. They might be doing 16, 17-hour days, and they're just getting paid peanuts. And most of the climbers don't realise that, because they think because they're paying so much, surely it's filtering down to the Sherpas and they're getting paid right. And in many cases, that is not the case.
No, that's wrong.
The money is going to the middleman. And without the Sherpas, most people wouldn't be able to climb at Everest.
There's people taking advantage, sadly. It's
a shame. It's a shame.
I mean,
it's sad to see.
It's an amazing achievement. You've done the mountaineering, you've done the jumping. So for most people, they'd be like, right, I'm going to go home now and put my feet up. And so then you think, right, I'm going to shoot across to Africa and start doing stuff over there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll tell you what, excuse me, that is just blown adventure clean out the water. So for me, it's, I just doesn't interest me anymore. World first, world records.
Yep.
I know that's easy to say when, got that under your belt. But so 8 years ago, I went and studied a master's in sustainable design, and just wanted, to go back to my sort of design roots and use the creative side of my brain more. And that's when I started researching the African elephant crisis. And I was so horrified by the statistics I was reading that I decided to use my design skills to come up with a fresh awareness raising campaign. So I designed this necklace that's 96 elephants cut in vegetable ivory, which is a sustainable nut from a palm tree from South America. And this necklace, I'll hold a picture up. It won 5 design awards. It's quite a piece. And basically it's showing the poaching data in a purely visual way.
Yep.
So to accompany my necklace of 96 elephants, which is showing the daily poaching rate in Africa.
It's 96 killed a day.
A day. Yep.
Wow.
So to accompany that is my hard-hitting, now global travelling exhibition, which showcases 35,000 elephants on a wall. Which is the annual poaching rate.
That's disgusting.
So I've purposely avoided using any gruesome or gory images.
Yep.
My campaign is non-political, it's non-confrontational. But to be honest with you, when you see 30,000 elephants on a wall,
that's huge.
35,000 elephants on a wall, it's shocking. To see and connect with that data visually is highly impactful. So what I'm doing is using design to bridge as a powerful communication tool to bridge the gap between human connection on one hand and scientific data on the other hand. So through my campaign, which is now a UK registered charity, How Many Elephants, I work with and support female rangers on the front line. So we've just launched World Female Ranger Day, which is going to be on June the 23rd this year. And we've created this platform that's bringing female rangers around the world together to collectively share their stories, share best practice. They can set up their own fundraising pages, etc. So it's a quite a groundbreaking awareness day because that hasn't been done before. But the inspiration for that came because over the last 3 years, I've had the rare privilege of spending time on the front line with 2 all-female poaching teams, the Black Mambas in South Africa and the Akashinga Rangers in Zimbabwe. And the main difference between those 2 teams is the Akashinga Rangers in Zimbabwe are fully armed. They've all got AK-47s. The women in South Africa, the Black Mambas, have pepper spray and handcuffs.
That's nuts.
And they're more the eyes and the ears on the ground. So one comes face to face with the poachers and the other calls in an armed response team.
But poachers, obviously, by their sort of trade, if I use that word loosely, they're obviously dangerous, desperate people almost, because I guess they're earning a lot of money, but because they need to, for whatever reason. And so they'll do whatever it takes to get that ivory, that tusk, and they're armed. So if you're unarmed and you're going up against them, that's a pretty dangerous. The odds are against you.
Yeah, I mean, there's basically 2 types of poachers. If we want to sort of break it right down, there's your opportunist villagers who might rent a gun for a couple of days, try and break into the box, and an elephant for its tusk, or a rhino for its horn, or lesser, a smaller animal, not a lesser animal, but a smaller animal, for bushmeat, or they might lay snares, and they don't get paid hardly anything. So, you got to think it's pretty dangerous work for very little money. But then on the other end of the scale, you've got your criminal syndicate networks who have sort of very high tech equipment. I'd say the poachers are still getting paid very small amounts, given the amount of money that would be involved higher up the chain. But 2 very different entities right there. So
they're serving let's say the Chinese market, where if it was like medicine and love potions or whatever, it's just crazy.
Yeah, absolutely crazy. So with my exhibition, at my first exhibition, I had 2 Chinese ladies come along, and they just burst into tears. And when I said to them, "Are you crying?" they said, "We just had no idea. We just did not know."
Lack of education. Absolutely
lack of education. And the Chinese word for ivory directly translates to tooth. And they said they just assumed they were replenishable, that tusks fall out, grow. Sadly not.
Such majestic creatures.
Again, my campaign's dealing with that, trying to address that gap in education and raising awareness. But I'm very specific. So people say, why just female rangers? What's wrong with the male rangers out there? Absolutely nothing wrong with the male rangers. I've spent time on the front line with male teams. I think all of them are doing an absolutely brilliant job. For me, as a small team, small charity, I have a great expression. Specific is terrific. And the more specific I can be, the greater impact I can make, rather than spreading myself too thin. So my charity focuses very much, How Many Elephants is focused on African elephants and anti-poaching. And then our World Female Range Day, obviously is championing and support female rangers on the front line. And these women, they are incredible, Adam. They're, now that you can just see the pride with which they wear their uniforms. They're now breadwinners. A lot of these women are now buying land, building houses, sending their kids to school. They've got healthcare. And it's the whole female ranger movement is picking up momentum at a brilliant pace, because it's just been found that the women are totally smashing it as in their role.
That's brilliant.
I was chatting to Craig, Spencer, the founder of the Black Mambas. They are the first all-female team to be set up, and they're in South Africa. And he said sort of in 2013, they were literally banging their heads against walls, losing rhinos, losing elephants at an alarming rate. And they just didn't know what are we going to do, left to do. And that's when he had this genius idea that these women from the local communities, they were an underutilized workforce. So he set up a selection. Women from the villages, applied to come and become rangers. And who knew it? I mean, they're tough, strong, dedicated women. The women in Akashinga, the founder, Damien Manda, he said, just as a sort of a metaphor for them, he said, he's from a military background in Australia. And he said, generally in sort of SAS style training, 38 men would start, 3 would finish. This is just an example. With these women, 38 start, 35 finish. Wow. They're from, many of these ladies just from extreme poverty. They could be from, abusive marriages. It could be AIDS orphans. When you start chatting to them and immersing yourself with them, you realise many of them have overcome huge adversities in their life. And they all of them said, when we turned up to become a ranger or try out for selection, we had nothing to lose.
Yes.
So they've just got this incredibly tough, strong mindset. And it's fascinating spending. I mean, I've spent several weeks with these women, and when I get home, film crews ring me up and say, well, hang on, how did you get that access? We only can get 2 hours a day with them. And I was literally living, patrolling, sleeping, eating, breathing with these women. And it was just an incredible experience, but it did blow adventure out the water. So I was out on patrol on one day with the Akashinga Rangers. They've all got AK-47s. I don't. I'm the only white woman there. And I say that because I just stood out a mile in the bush, and they said, could put our uniform on. You might try and blend in a little bit better, but I don't think that totally worked. Short sleeved anyway. And, I just felt really exposed. I mean, we were dropped out in the middle of nowhere. There's wild animals, there's signs of poachers. They're all armed. I'm not. And I just thought, wow, these women are my lifeline. Without these women, I'm a dead woman. And it was just, like I said, it was a whole different style of adventure. I'm not even sure if it was an adventure. It was more very real life.
But rewarding.
It was kind of, it was kind of more like being in a war zone, because because these women face to face with the poachers. Some of the poachers are armed and dangerous, and there was just no knowing what the outcomes were going to be. So pretty committing stuff.
I'm going to look into that and follow that because, that's something that's quite close to my heart, sort of conservation and what have you. And we were in Namibia a couple of years ago, sort of a few mates. We just sort of decided to travel across it, sort of like wild camp travel. And when we were going into the reserves and what have you, we didn't actually see as much. Well, you see all the signs or whatever saying, watch out for rhinos, hippos, lions. But I expected to see a lot more. When you got sort of talking to the locals, they're like, no, I mean, I think there was a bit of a drought. They'd been on air at the time, so they'd lost a bit to that. But they said there's basically poaching, a real problem. And when you see like these like elephants go past, or you see the big bull elephant at the front, protecting the herd, you think, wow, what? They're amazing creatures. And why would anyone want to do that? But I suppose as humans,
desperation, money and greed.
It is
all along different points on the chain.
It is, yeah. I mean, hopefully there, something would change. But so moving towards the end of the interview, I've really enjoyed speaking to you. I mean, what an amazing life. Probably talk about things for hours on. If you had an opportunity to jump in a time machine and meet someone from history, is there any one person that jumps out? You think, yes, I'd love to join them on that adventure, or sit down and have a cup of tea with them. They're like a real...
probably George Mallory.
We've had a few Mallorys.
Yeah, I'd probably go with someone from the past. Yeah. Maybe, the Murray Irvine mystery. Did they make it to the summit or not?
Did they? Yeah.
He'd be a good one to invite to your dinner party.
He would, wouldn't he? Yeah,
he'd have some stories to
tell. Is Mallory the guy? Was it with him and someone else? And they found a camera recently, and they're trying to develop the photos.
They haven't found the camera.
They haven't. Okay.
No, the camera's still one of the great mysteries in history. What happened to Irvine's camera? Who knows? And he never got found either. It was George Mallory got found in 1999 by an American mountaineer, Conrad Anker. And it's fascinating. Like, there's a film about it called The Wildest Dream, and it's just his skin is like porcelain.
Yeah,
like it's like a china cup, just reasonably preserved on the side of Everest for 70 odd years. So I'd say him. I reckon he'd be an interesting one to have a chat with.
So I think winning the race at the moment is Mallory and Shackleton. And the other one is that he's the other guy that he's come out well.
Could have been more.
And one of the questions in season 1, when we were doing a lot of military stuff, we used to ask people, said, look, if you're running out the door, you're packing your gear to go away on an adventure on wherever you're off to, what are your top 3 things that you would take with you? Is there 3 things that always go on a trip with you? Any sort of items, your must-haves?
And it's really weird. People think I'm quite strange for this, but I'm never without pen and paper. That sounds odd. I got asked the other day if I was marooned on a desert island, what 3 things would I have, and I said pen, paper, and a beer. I'm quite traditional. I tiff lots of ideas all the time, and I'm just contented. If you give me a pen and paper, I can whittle away hours just sketching and writing. And so always take pen and paper on my expeditions, because there's lots of downtime in the tents. What else would I say? I would always take probably something boring like a head torch. You can't see where you're going, then you're in a whole world of problems. So and then I'll still go with the beer. Base camp, I would, for sure.
It's got to be beer. Beer, pen, beer.
Yeah,
because you can use the label. You can use the label on the beer to write on. So maybe 2 beers. So
there you go. I'd be more than happy with that.
Excellent. Well, I've really enjoyed having you on the show today. I think for anyone who wants to follow you, see what you're up to next, obviously to follow on the 23rd of June, I think that'd be great to sort of be able to see. What's the best way of following you? Is Instagram?
Can I just say at that point, sorry, can I interrupt you there? There's a walking challenge. You can run it. So the World Female Ranger Day, you can do it anytime you like, but we're going to all do it on June 3rd for a week, and replicating the distances that the Rangers walk. So they walk 20 k's a day patrol. So you can either do 20 k's a day for 7 days, or you can do 5Ks, which is a snare sweep, or 2Ks, training lap, or you make your own distance up. So go on to worldfemalerangerday.org, set up a fundraising page, and get walking.
Fantastic. Well, we'll get this podcast out before then, so people can hear that. And then we'll also give it a big plug on the 23rd. That's amazing. And then on Instagram, you're at Holly Budge.
At Holly Budge, or at How Many Elephants, or at World Female Ranger Day.
Brilliant. So anyone who's listening to this, head over to Instagram, follow that, share it. Let's sort of spread the word. But,
Thank you.
Holly,
that would be amazing. Thanks so much.
Brilliant. Thanks for coming on and sharing your journey. Really enjoyed that. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Adam.
That's cool. Well, that was Holly. I don't know what to say. I mean, that was a great hour. I mean, I think for someone in those 42 years who's crammed in that much, that's pretty epic. If anyone wants to sort of follow on Holly and what she's doing, best ways to go onto Instagram. You can go on to at How Many Elephants, and you can see more about, obviously, the conservationist works. You can also, she's at Holly Budge is hers, and she's also co-founder of World Female Ranger Day, which is today, the 23rd of June. So let's spread the love, let's spread the word, leave comments, and just, get some feedback to the show. If you can go onto iTunes, we sort of mentioned earlier, that'd be great. Just a little star liking, some comments, any feedback on our Instagram. Get in contact with us. If there's something you want to hear or something you didn't like, let us know. We're all friends here. Next week, we have got a great interview with Colonel John Blashford-Snell. He's one of the greatest explorers, and you're going to hear some great stories with him as well. So, really hope you enjoy that. I'm also sort of mentioned earlier about Ray Carroll, author. You can find him on Instagram, former member 22SAS. He's currently going around the UK pedalling, I'll use that pun, on his Brompton bike, selling his new book, which is fantastic, The Clinic. So, I'd urge anyone out there who's seen that to buy it, read it, and comment again on him. Let's help the guy along. And we're going to get him on the show, and we're going to speak to him at various checkpoints along the way. Lastly, one of the things we have done is we've created our own coffee brand. So, we've done this in mind of military veterans. We called it Another Man's Brew, and it's available on Shopify. So if you would like to grab a cup or two, head over to Shopify, grab some, and then we're putting profits across to military charities, so that money isn't wasted. Anyway, thanks for listening. Head over to iTunes, please leave a review, and speak to you soon.